Playing football is very simple, but playing simple football is the hardest thing there is. In these words, Johan Cruyff laid out the great contradiction of the game. On the surface, it is simple. 2 teams, 2 goals, 1 ball. But from these elements, a complex game emerges. Infinite interactions, infinite choices. Just to navigate it is an art. But within this complexity, Cruyff imagined patterns, a logical system of shapes, angles, distances, and by imposing this logic, he established order. Simple football was possible after all. But, as this knowledge was passed down, Cruyff's students realized something. By imposing their own logical system, they could not only simplify the game for the players, but take control of it themselves. The game, once wild and pure, could be tamed. The players an extension of the coach's will. What was born was an era of logical systems, complicated designs that maximized efficiency, reduced uncertainty, and sought control in every aspect of the game. But what the coaches didn't realize was the cost of their power. Shielded from the natural complexity, the players became reliant on these systems, unable to navigate the game themselves. Over time, the game became mechanical, the players less expressive, and the fans less inspired. But not everyone succumbed to the systems. Though there were few, these outliers chose to forgo control, believing still in the artists. And from these outliers, a new path is emerging. A football founded not on coaching logic, but on something else entirely. And today, we will finally explore the incredible potential of the alternative. A radical, but beautiful, future of football. It is taken for granted that the best managers are those with the strongest identity, those who can imagine the perfect game in their head and translate that idea into the actions of the players.
They have in their brains the video of the perfect game, they have it in their minds. And the job of a football manager is to transform this idea of football into the heads, hearts, brains, veins of your players.
We assume that without this overarching idea, the game would descend into chaos. But is that true? Carlo Ancelotti is one of the most successful coaches of all time, and his method differs greatly from Rangnick's top-down vision. The most striking thing is that Real Madrid in these years has not had a single identity. Low blocks, transitions, possession, everything. The fact that we don't have a clear identity makes us think that we don't have a game, and it is true, we have many. In the context of modern football, this is radical. The coaching game model is considered fundamental. It shapes the structure, playing style, decision-making. But for Ancelotti, in the absence of this model, the football must be founded on something else, the players themselves. And it's from the relationships between them that the structure, style, and decisions emerge from the bottom up. As simple as this seems, many people in football resist this idea, believe it unrealistic. And yet, Ancelotti's success suggests otherwise. What if then, after all, this game model is less fundamental than we thought? And what if unlocking a team's true potential meant freeing it from coaching control? It sounds ridiculous, but what if it were true? An interesting case study is FC Barcelona. Under Xavi Hernandez, they were built on a very rigid positional play, with clear structures that form the basis of the football. This approach provided Barcelona with a clear identity and framework, and with it they were able to rebuild and compete. But over time, this framework became increasingly predictable. Opponents knew what spaces they'd occupy and how they'd attack them. The system could be easily targeted by defensive schemes. But with the arrival of Hansi Flick, these positional structures were no longer prioritized. Where previously space was the primary reference, with the intention of finding players in specific zones, under Flick it became more common to orient around ball and teammates, allowing players to move more and seek combinations. With higher degrees of freedom, Barcelona became more complex, unpredictable, and ultimately created more varied attacking patterns. You could argue that by undoing the positional structures, Flick's method unlocked the team's latent potential. But a structure is just one small part of the coaching game model. Beneath it is something much more important, a founding logic that the entire coaching vision is built on. So if we knew exactly what that logic was, perhaps we could break away from it completely. In doing so, would we unlock even greater potential for the players? In the modern game, there are hundreds of ideas and game models, but many of them are based on the same fundamental logic, one that can be traced back to the Dutch school and Johan Cruyff. The purpose of Cruyff's logic was to unite his players around a single idea, so no matter what situation they encountered, every player would approach it in the same way. And as this logic was passed down to Pep Guardiola, it became taught as a universal law for all players to obey. Rationally occupy space and move the ball to the space. And as every player followed that law, a clear playing style was born. Occupy certain spaces, move the ball to move the opponent, and find the unmarked player, or free man. With every player on the same page, the team could become an efficient and effective machine. But there's a big problem with applying a universal law like that, because while it might give you an approach to every problem, it might not give you the best approach. And in fact, by stripping this logic away, something very interesting happens. For example, here Real Madrid have created an overload. The free man is Valverde, with Vinicius Jr. on the ball. Now, if Vinicius were to apply Cruyff's law, he wouldn't have to think twice. Valverde is the pass. But there are other things going on. For example, the movement of Rodrigo. But as Vinicius shapes up to make that pass, it triggers a defensive movement. So in a split second, all of this information has to be processed, and Vinicius adapts. In this moment, there is no consideration of what should happen, no universal law being obeyed. All that matters is the information within the game. And in a football match, there are millions of moments like this, each made up of a million subtle details, and no single law imagined by a coach can account for all of them. By applying such a law, you're ultimately limiting your players, conditioning them to produce certain behaviours rather than adapting to what's in front of them. So it's no surprise that Real Madrid have a rich pedigree of adaptable players because Ancelotti offers no universal law. When they have the ball at their feet, there is nothing I can tell them because they are the best. Of course, as a result, many people reduce Ancelotti's success to individual quality, but it is also the result of a coaching decision to platform the qualities of his players rather than his own ideas about the game. For some, that carries a major risk, where you end up with a group of talented individuals rather than a cohesive team. But it turns out that by leaning even more into this player-first approach, it's possible for the opposite to happen. And to see that, we'll look at a very special team. Lionel Scaloni's Argentina are a unique football team, and Scaloni himself is a very interesting coach. He once said, "There's a risk of losing the essence of a player, taking away what is precisely their best quality. If you're constantly telling them what to do, you run that risk. You can't control players with a joystick." This sentiment echoes what we saw with Vinicius. If you tell players how to respond to situations, you risk taking away their essence, that is, their unique approach to problems. They are limited to the coach's solution rather than what they find to be the best solution in the moment. But what we see from Argentina is not just individual adaptation, like in the case of Vinicius, but the team as a collective searching for the best solution. Throughout the course of a game, you'll see them continually experiment with different ideas in a way that feels spontaneous and frankly dance-like. For example, sometimes they do use Cruyff's law. When the opponent defends zonally and the spaces to exploit, they have no problem spreading out and playing into those spaces. But when the opponent is more aggressive and the space is limited, they'll experiment with routes that defy that logic, playing into the pressure rather than finding the free man. Triangles may not be embedded into the structure, but they'll still appear spontaneously. Effectively, through this experimentation, Argentina don't just apply one kind of logic, but whatever logic is best in that moment. Their potential range of solutions is incredibly vast. It's not just effective, but thoroughly entertaining. The question is, where did this collective intelligence come from? In all of these cases, by removing some top-down information, whether it was a specific structure or the whole overriding logic, something more powerful seemed to emerge. But did these things appear by themselves, or was there something else going on? The answer, it turns out, is profound. And within it, we're not only going to find a recipe for better teams, but something many people believe impossible: we'll find the secret to the future of football, to a world without tactics. Imagine a football team without any top-down instruction, one reliant entirely on the collective decisions of its players. It may seem far-fetched, but could such a team, a self-organizing team, compete at the top level? If we're going to get there, we'll need to learn from the likes of Real Madrid and Argentina, but take their methods much further. So let's go back to this example. The reason why so many players would automatically pass to the free man, even if it's not the best option, is because they're respecting a game model. However, that doesn't necessarily make it a conscious decision. In fact, it's often a response that has been conditioned over time. For example, take this very common positional exercise popularized by Guardiola. It's a 4 versus 4 possession game with 3 neutral players. Every player in possession is fixed to the outside of the pitch, except for the pivot, and there's a 2-touch limit. By designing the session in this way, you reinforce a specific framework for possession and problem solving, one based on positional discipline, on passing from zone to zone, and finding the free player. After months or years of this, you can see how these concepts would become automatic, deeply embedded in the players. Without thinking, you'd look for the free player, and you'd do it with as few touches as possible. Of course, what we want to do is remove all such conditioning, so we can open up more possibilities for the players. This exercise is an alternative to Guardiola's. It's still a 4 versus 4, but we have 4 supporting players around the outside. And the key difference here is that the 4 players in the middle are unrestricted. They can go where they want and take unlimited touches. This effectively dissolves the predefined method of possession. Rather than passing to where players should be, as in the positional game, attention must be focused on where teammates actually are. It directs attention to what's happening in the game. This also develops more creativity, because unlike in the first example, you can't just memorize the positions of teammates and pass between them. You have to explore the possibilities that open up in real time. 1-2s, dummies, moments of deception all emerge. This exercise is based on ecological dynamics, a school of thought that emphasizes that link between player and environment. By challenging players to find their own solutions, we help them become deeply in tune with that environment. And it has parallels with the most effective school there is, the street, a natural factory of creativity and talent, where the game's great artists have learned their craft. By applying these principles, it's almost inevitable we develop more creative and adaptable footballers. And that's going to be crucial in the realization of a self-organizing team. However, we do need to be careful, because our goal is not just the development of great individuals. Like Argentina, we must find a way to align the players' intentions, so they can adapt to situations collectively. And to do that, we're going to a very unlikely place. We live in a world of complex adaptive systems. Whether it's a flock of birds, an ecosystem, or the entire natural world, these are the systems that shape existence. And surprisingly, because of their organization, they may be relevant to football. In these systems, each element has its own small sphere of influence. It responds to local information and interacts with those around it. But from these interactions, incredible things happen. Order, ingenuity, adaptability, properties that can't be explained by any one element alone. This is known as emergence, and it's of particular interest to us, because it allows these systems to develop collective intelligence, able to self-organize without centralized control. As humans, we are not detached from these systems. Our societies, even our sports teams, can be considered complex adaptive systems. If so, perhaps there is a way to evoke that same collective intelligence. And incredibly, there's already research being done into this. This paper discusses how coaching might change if sports teams were considered complex adaptive systems, and it gives us 3 powerful conclusions as we try to tap into this magic. Firstly, just like emergence in nature, performance in teams emerges from the local interactions or synergies between players. 2, if we want to create these synergies, we must expose players to challenging constraints, which we'll come back to in a second. And 3, these constraints must be applied to the collective. Rather than improving individuals, we should train the team as if it were a single entity. So to summarize, we need to apply constraints to the collective in order to produce synergies. But what does that actually mean, and what does it look like practically? Well, here's an example. From this exercise, we'll see in practice the beginnings of self-organization without a traditional formation or structure. It's an 8 versus 8 game with 2 neutral players. There are no fixed positions other than 2 more neutral players within this zone. In the game, there are 2 ways to score. Either A, the possession team makes 5 one-touch passes, or B, a player outside the zone receives a pass from within it. So while the players aren't constrained positionally, their behaviour is constrained by the layout and the scoring system. They're forced to balance a global awareness of potential routes into the zones alongside perception of local details in order to make one-touch passes. To be successful then, the team as a collective must synergize. They must create these local and global connections in order to play over, around, or through the opposition. Without being given a structure by the coach, they find their own functional arrangement to succeed under the given constraints. So this is one example of how constraints can develop synergies if applied to the collective. However, by changing those constraints, coaches can help build different types of synergies to identify weaknesses within the team and improve. Here, for example, the coach has cut off the right side of the pitch to simulate an attack on the left. In this case, the coach wants to help the team explore ways through the opponent when they open up. As such, they'll score double points if they break in behind with a through ball. Of course, opportunities to go over or around the opposition are still available. So here the constraints are very different, and as such, the team can develop new types of synergies. They'll still explore those that they might be more used to, such as runs in behind and diagonal passes, but because of the scoring system, they also must be aware of the emerging routes through the middle. The team, collectively, becomes more deeply in tune with all the flows of the game, allowing them to shift between different modes of attack. So you can see by how manipulating these constraints, a team can self-organize, synergize, and find collective solutions. This can be applied to attacking, defending, transitions, anything. And the real beauty of this is that rather than following a set logic, this football would be built much more on intuition, on the deep, intangible connections between players and the game. And perhaps that was the real magic of Argentina. Maybe after all, it wasn't about applying multiple logics, but about detaching from logic altogether, about relating to each other on a much deeper level, where individuals could be creative and expressive, and yet understood their connection to the whole. This is the full expression of decentralized, self-organizing football, and its potential far exceeds that of rigid structures and condition patterns. And yet, to many, it may still seem unrealistic. After all, it feels a world away from what actually works. The top-down systems that do, and always have, dominated the game. So, to make this a reality, there is still one last barrier to overcome. The most daunting, but by far the most important. On the surface, it's a simple game. Look deeper, and there is endless complexity. For many years, we saw this complexity as an obstacle, something to tame and control. Those who succeeded became godlike. We worshipped them in the good times, berated them in the bad. Accepting them as our saviors, we gave them more and more power. But behind this power remains an essential truth, that a team is not the ideas of its manager, just as a nation is not the actions of its leader. The self is not the thoughts of the mind. It is interactions, relationships, synergies that make a team, place, and self. That savior which we thought was keeping us from chaos was merely an illusion. True power comes not from above, but within. So the final barrier for us to overcome, the key to harnessing this power, means finally detaching from top-down control. To do that doesn't mean removing the coach. They remain just as essential, adjusting the environment to challenge, refine, and synergize. But it does mean returning power to the players, restoring their true relationship with the game. Playful, harmonious, detached from ideas and abstractions, existing fully within the game, within the present moment, because there is everything they need. Patterns, synergies, expression, all emerging in real time. an unpredictable game, an authentic game, a game that means something. And the grace of it all is that there is no fantasy required, no imagination. The example is in front of us, all around us. Our only task is to follow it. Whether you're a player, coach, or fan of this beautiful game, there's no need to wait on its future. It's here, right now. So whatever you do, don't let it go.